before the 10 Commandments, before the parting of the Red Sea. There was Zipporah, the woman who stood beside Moses long before the miracles. She's often forgotten. But what if I told you Zipporah may have saved Moses' life, played a role in the divine plan far greater than we've ever imagined? Welcome back to Bible Stories Unveiled, where we reveal the hidden stories and forgotten figures of the Bible. Today, we uncover the extraordinary and controversial story, Zipporah, the first wife of Moses. Was she just a footnote in Moses' journey, or was she a crucial part of God's plan? Why did God almost kill Moses? And why did Zipporah's bold actions change everything? Let's unravel the mystery of this Midianite woman who defied expectations, challenged a prophet, and may have altered history. The stranger at the well. The day Moses met Zipporah, long before Moses stood before Pharaoh, before the Red Sea split in two, and even before the burning bush blazed with divine fire. He was a man on the run, broken, wanted, and uncertain of his future. After killing an Egyptian in a moment of righteous anger, Moses fled Egypt to escape the wrath of Pharaoh. He was no longer a prince of power, but an exile in the wilderness, wandering into a foreign land. It is in this wilderness, not in the courts of Egypt, that Moses' true story begins. In Exodus 2:15, we are told that Moses arrived in Midian and rested by a well, a scene familiar in ancient scripture, where wells often mark divine appointments. As he sat there, a group of 7 daughters approached the well to draw water for their father's flock. Among them was Zipporah, the daughter of Reuel, the priest of Midian. But what happens next is no ordinary encounter. As the women began to draw water, hostile shepherds came and tried to drive them away. Moses, though a stranger in a foreign land, stood up for them and defended them, just as he had once defended the Hebrew slave in Egypt. His sense of justice hadn't died in exile. This moment of courage, of intervening for the defenseless, would not go unnoticed. The women returned home to their father earlier than expected, and when he asked why, they replied, "An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds." Though Moses had abandoned his title, his Egyptian identity still clung to him. But to Jethro, this act of courage signaled more than a traveler's kindness. It revealed character. And so, Reuel welcomed Moses into his home, and soon after, gave him Zipporah as his wife. We often rush past this verse, but consider the magnitude of it. Zipporah was not just a tribal woman, she was the daughter of a Midianite priest, a spiritual figure in his own right. Her family had its own traditions, its own gods, its own way of life. This marriage was not merely personal, it was cultural, theological, and prophetic. Moses, a Hebrew raised in Pharaoh's palace, had now married into a Midianite household, and through this unlikely union, God was weaving together something far more complex than we often realize. He was preparing Moses not just to liberate a people, but to become a man who could lead, mediate, and endure. And Zipporah would be a crucial part of that journey. Their life in Midian was quiet but formative. For the next 40 years, Moses lived as a shepherd, tending sheep, raising a family, and walking among hills far removed from Egypt's grandeur. Zipporah bore him a son, Gershom, whose name means "I have become a foreigner in a foreign land." The name itself is telling. Moses still felt like an outsider, neither Egyptian nor fully Hebrew, and now living among me. And yet, through Zipporah and their shared life, God was reshaping Moses' identity. It's easy to overlook Zipporah during this long, silent period in Scripture. There are no great speeches from her, no miracles, no prophecies, just a wife, a mother, and a shepherd's partner. But this silence is not absence. Zipporah's presence grounded Moses. While the Israelites suffered in Egypt, Moses was being prepared in obscurity, and Zipporah was part of that preparation. When the burning bush finally appeared in Exodus 3, and God called Moses to return to Egypt, everything changed. God had chosen Moses to lead his people out of bondage, to confront Pharaoh, and to deliver a nation. And Moses, hesitant and afraid, began the journey with Zipporah and their sons by his side. She wasn't left behind. She was part of the mission. But what came next would be one of the strangest and most mysterious moments in all of Scripture, a moment that placed Zipporah at the very center of God's divine plan in a way few expected. On the road back to Egypt, something terrifying happened. The Lord met Moses and sought to kill him. It's a verse that has confounded scholars and pastors alike. Why would God, after calling Moses, suddenly seek his death? What had Moses done or failed to do that provoked such wrath? The answer lies in a covenant that had been neglected: circumcision. The covenant God had made with Abraham, passed down through generations, required that every male child be circumcised as a sign of belonging to the chosen people. Moses, perhaps because he was raised Egyptian or because of his life in Midian, had not circumcised his son, and that omission, though it may seem small, was a breach of covenant. And in that critical moment, it was not Moses who saved himself. It was Zipporah. She took a sharp flint, circumcised their son, and touched the blood to Moses' feet, saying, "Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me." And only then did the Lord relent. This is the moment that defined Zipporah, just as a wife, but as a spiritual protector. She understood what was at stake, whether through divine insight, tribal wisdom, or spiritual conviction. She acted decisively when Moses could not. She fulfilled the covenant he had neglected. In that act, she stood between Moses and death, not just physically, but covenantally. We must ask ourselves, where did she learn this? How did she know to act when even Moses, God's chosen leader, seemed... Some scholars believe Zipporah, being the daughter of a priest, had an acute understanding of sacred rituals. Others believe she simply obeyed a supernatural instinct in the moment. But one thing is clear. In that hour, Zipporah preserved the mission of Moses and the future of Israel. Her hands, stained with blood, marked the moment that reaffirmed Moses' covenant with God. It was a shocking, raw, almost primal scene, but it was also profoundly spiritual. Zipporah's action echoed the theme that would later define Israel's journey. Blood covers, blood redeems, blood restores covenant. And in this strange encounter, Zipporah prefigured the deeper truths that would be fulfilled in the Passover, the priesthood, and ultimately the cross. She was not just a supportive wife, she was a woman who knew when to step into the breach. And through her obedience, a prophet was spared and a nation's deliverance moved forward. Zipporah's presence in Moses' life was not incidental, it was divinely orchestrated. After fleeing Egypt, broken and confused, Moses arrived in Midian and, exhausted, sat by a well. It's here that divine providence led him to an encounter that would change his course. 7 daughters of the priest of Midian came to draw water, but were driven away by shepherds. Moses stood up for them, defended them, and watered their flock. This act of justice mirrored the very heart of who he would become, a deliverer of the oppressed. When Reuel, their father, heard of this, he invited Moses into his home and gave him his daughter Zipporah in marriage. Zipporah was not just a reward for Moses' bravery. She was a mirror, a teacher, and at times a rebuke to the man chosen by God. She was a Midianite, a descendant of Abraham through his son Midian. And though outside the covenant lineage of Israel, her spiritual sensitivity and courage stood out in ways many overlook. The most mysterious and chilling episode in her story comes in Exodus 4:24-26. As Moses was en route to Egypt under God's command, something strange happened. At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met him and sought to kill him. Why? Because Moses had neglected the covenantal rite of circumcision for his son. But it was not Moses who responded, it was... She quickly took a flint knife and circumcised their son herself, touching Moses' feet with the foreskin, saying, "Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me." This is more than a cryptic till, it is a moment soaked in spiritual weight. Zipporah discerned what Moses had not, that obedience to God's covenant could not be delayed or minimized, even for the one called to be a prophet. In this chilling moment, it was the foreign wife, not the Hebrew husband, who upheld the command of God. Her actions saved Moses' life and demonstrated a spiritual boldness that matched, if not surpassed, her husband's at that time. This moment shows us that being outside of Israel did not exclude someone from divine wisdom or covenantal significance. In Zipporah, we see the unexpected faithfulness of those on the margins of the main story, those whom God still uses mightily. After the circumcision episode, Zipporah disappears from the narrative for a time, and questions arise. Did she return to Midian? Did Moses send her back out of fear for her safety, as he prepared to confront Pharaoh? The scriptures give us a hint in Exodus 18, where Jethro, her father, comes to meet Moses in the wilderness after the Exodus, bringing Zipporah and her two sons Gershom and Eleazar with him. This reunion occurs after the Israelites had been delivered from Egypt, showing us that Zipporah had indeed been separated from Moses during the intense and dangerous season of confrontation with Pharaoh and the plagues. Yet even in her absence, her earlier role had been crucial. She preserved Moses' life, and reminded him of the cost of disobedience. Her 2 sons bore names rich in meaning. Gershom, meaning "I have been a sojourner in a foreign land," reflected Moses' exile and alienation. Eleazar, meaning "My God is my helper," was a testimony to divine protection. Though Moses named them, it was likely Zipporah who raised them during the years when Moses was engulfed in the liberation of Israel. Her influence on their spiritual and cultural formation must not be overlooked. She was a woman raising children of Hebrew destiny in a Midianite land, navigating the delicate tension between 2 identities. Jethro's visit also provides another window into Zipporah's world. Her father, a priest of Midian, observed all that God had done for Moses and Israel. He blessed the name of the Lord, even offering sacrifices to the God of Israel. What Zipporah may have inherited from her father was a reverence for the divine, not through the law of Moses, which had not yet been given, but through a spiritual sensitivity rooted in the remnants of Abrahamic knowledge preserved among the Her heritage, then, was not foreign in the hostile sense, but deeply entwined with ancient covenantal echoes. And yet, despite her valor and spiritual insight, Zipporah remains in the shadows of the biblical record. She is never mentioned again after this reunion. Her silence is not insignificant. It is the silence of a woman who shaped history quietly. She had stood between Moses and death. She had raised covenantal sons in exile. She had walked beside a prophet before the miracles and the fame. And then she fades from the pages, but not from the story. Zipporah's legacy is one of paradox. She was both outsider and insider. A Midianite by birth, yet married into the very lineage through which God would establish his covenant with Israel. She was not of Abraham's household, yet she stood at the threshold of a moment that would determine the fate of the Hebrew nation. In a time when few women were named in sacred texts, her name echoes with defiance, with compassion, and with the power to intercede when even a prophet hesitated. We often speak of Moses as the deliverer of Israel, the lawgiver, the friend of God. But before the Red Sea parted, before the mountain quaked, before the tablets of stone were engraved there, was a moment when Moses would have perished at the hand of the Lord, were it not for Zipporah. She acted with spiritual clarity and unwavering courage. She saved the vessel of God's will. In doing so, she altered the destiny of nations. Perhaps this is the lesson, that greatness is often carried not just on the shoulders of those who stand at the forefront, but also in the quiet strength of those who walk beside them, and sometimes even ahead of them when the path demands it. Zipporah challenges our assumptions. She was not Hebrew. She was not submissive in the traditional sense. She was bold, decisive, and fiercely loyal. In a moment of divine crisis, she did what Moses could not. And then, like a passing storm that clears the heavens, she stepped back, leaving only a trace of her presence in the sacred text, but a thunderous impact in the unfolding of salvation history. She may not be remembered with psalms or tributes, but the covenant continued because a woman once held a knife and faith in equal measure. And that is why Zipporah, the first wife of Moses, deserves not just to be remembered but to be honored. Zipporah's story is short, but her presence is powerful. She reminds us that obedience, courage, and discernment often come from unexpected places, and that God can use anyone, even someone outside the covenant family, to fulfill his purpose. So what do you think? Was Zipporah just a supporting character, or did she play a divine role we've underestimated? If this story opened your eyes, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and share it with others who love uncovering the depths of the Bible. And don't forget to hit the bell for more hidden stories just like this. Until next time, stay curious, stay faithful, and may the truth continue to set you free.